Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about something kind of interesting that's been happening with the MCU, and more specifically Doctor Strange 2, or also known as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I almost said in the Mouth of Madness, like the John Carpenter film, but it's interesting because the director, or I should say now former director of Multiverse of Madness, Scott Derrickson, has left the project due to creative differences with Marvel. Now, this is interesting because there haven't been, well, I shouldn't say there haven't been entirely, but for a large amount of the Marvel films, there haven't been very many clashes when it comes to directors clashing with Kevin Feige over things, or more specifically, Marvel Entertainment as a whole. There's been certain smaller examples. We obviously knew about Joss Whedon and his whole debacle with Avengers 2, and some other stuff like that. But the point is that Scott Derrickson has chosen to actually just leave the project, and there's some speculation going on about why he left. We don't have an official reason, but the speculation does seem pretty plausible, so I'm just going to kind of go over that, and also kind of what this means for the MCU in terms of, like, now Doctor Strange 2 is kind of up in the air a little bit in terms of some creative choices. But if you go and you look at why he left. Now he came out at Comic-Con and basically said that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was going to be the MCU's first kind of horror or scary film. Now we knew it was not going to be. I don't think anybody believed that it was going to be anything even remotely resembling an actual horror film, because in order to do that, Disney would never let that slide with the MCU in its current state. So I think we all knew that was kind of not going to happen, but at the same time, when you look at, what they were kind of going with, there's the whole thing with New Mutants, which is going to be coming out in April of this year. And that was kind of considered, if it had come out, when it comes out, it was originally really touted as that first hardcore type of horror movie in the superhero genre. And it's something that it didn't really catch on, and then they started doing some other stuff, but then this was kind of supposed to be the MCU's little foray into it, even though it's probably, again, it's not going to be anything resembling a horror movie. But then you have Kevin Feige, who came out with some recent comments stating that Doctor Strange 2 would not be a quote-unquote horror movie. So they were never going to go hardcore horror with this thing. They probably would have gone a little bit darker, or at least as dark as they could have pushed it, and I kind of get that. But Scott Derrickson obviously wanted this thing to go a lot darker than what Feige and Marvel wanted to do, because it would mess up their crappy little formula that they have. And here's the thing. Doctor Strange he's not already been portrayed as like this guy that, this very kind of horror-based character, even though he does deal with magic and stuff like that. The first film really did not feel like that at all, which was also directed by Derrickson. And I think that kind of having that tonal shift can work, even though the first film was successful, because, you looked at Thor with that, at least for me anyway, and for a lot of people, when they came out with Thor Ragnarok, that was a welcome change in tone from the previous two movies, and the humor worked. So, you got to watch that, and it kind of revitalized that character for a lot of people that had kind of gotten bored with him, that hadn't really liked him to begin with. And so now, if you were to do the same thing with Doctor Strange, that could be a very interesting contrast compared to the humor that we're used to. But again, obviously Kevin Feige and Scott Derrickson had butted heads on this, or at least that's what it appears anyway. And that resulted in Derrickson leaving the project. Although it does seem that he's going to be helming a movie very soon anyway, because Blumhouse contacted him, I believe either today or yesterday, not very long after he was let go, and offered him a directing deal. So he is not going to be hurting for work, which is good, at least, because I don't think he's necessarily a bad director, and I think he does like horror. But this is more interesting moving forward, because it shows that the MCU is not willing to kind of compromise that formula that they have, or that they tote, kind of. The Marvel formula. What's evolved into kind of this very, over the kind of jokey humor and some action and some bright colors and stuff like that. It all the movies, unfortunately, moving forward, are starting to blend together. In a lot of cases, it doesn't seem like they're as diverse as they could have been. And this was going to be a welcome thing, a welcome kind of distraction in another direction, because with most of the movies that we're going to be seeing in Phase 4, Shang-Chi, okay, again, kind of your standard fare. Eternals is going to be a bit of an interesting one. Black Widow, we know what's going to happen there. It was a departure from what we were used to, where we can kind of figure stuff out initially, whereas this thing was kind of a bit more interesting. But now it seems like they're going to try and rein this thing back into kind of the main, Marvel line that they like to try and toe. And I think ultimately it hurts. It's going to hurt them in the long run, because I think you need to experiment at this point. Because if you don't, then the product itself is going to get stale, or at least more stale than it is. And again, a lot of people checked out after Endgame. A lot of people. I think a lot more people also checked out after Spider-Man, because that was, the last film that came out with last year. And you need to kind of rehook those people. And I think if you started doing stuff that was a bit unexpected, then maybe, you'd get people that would pay a bit more attention to what films were actually coming out. But it seems like they're going more the stagnation route, which is unfortunate. Again, it's kind of the idea in Hollywood where, oh, it worked once, let's do it again. But it does. Audiences will eventually get bored of it, and if you don't experiment, which they're going to have to eventually, they're going to have to experiment. But if they don't experiment and they don't start doing it soon, then they're never going to find the next thing that works, and that would be unfortunate. Again, despite the fact that some of the movies that they're coming out with do not look, some of them do not look particularly good or particularly interesting. But I want to know what your opinion is. Do you think that Derrickson was right to clash with Fahey? Do you think that having a more horror-based character in the MCU, like a Blade or a Doctor Strange, if they had chosen to go that route, would be good for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole? Or do you think that maybe this is kind of something like, all right, just stick to your formula, don't try and branch out too much? Again, I like to know your thoughts. I'll put them in the comments below. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?